My name is Bernadette Caldwell, and if you think this is going to be the story of a sweet old woman who quietly faded into a beige-walled nursing home, you might actually regret missing out on this dramatic story. So before you sit down and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Because this story doesn't start with a funeral. It starts with a smile and ends with a signature. Jeremy, my only child, brought me to the facility on a Wednesday. The sun was out. The car smelled like his wife's perfume, and his voice was coated in that sickly sweet tone people reserve for toddlers and the dying. "It's just temporary, Mom," he said. "Just until we figure out next steps." He parked in front of Maple Hill Residence, a modern two-story nursing home painted in calm, friendly colors. The entrance had flower beds, a little fountain, a cheerful woman at the front desk. "This place is perfect for you," he said. And that was the first time I should have known something was wrong. Because perfect is not the word for a place that comes after someone takes away your keys. I had been living independently for over 30 years. I paid off my house with a teacher's salary. I made my own repairs, baked my own bread, even mowed my own lawn when the arthritis allowed. But when I tripped on the front porch last fall, things changed. Jeremy said, "You need help." Lila, his wife, said, "We're just trying to make sure you're safe." And me, I said, "Okay." Because I didn't want to be a burden. Because I believed them. He kissed me on the forehead and left before the intake nurse finished processing my name. Didn't help me unpack. Didn't stay for lunch. The room was clean, small. It had a view of the parking lot and a twin bed with scratchy sheets. There was a bulletin board with a note that said, "Welcome, Bernadette," written in glitter marker. I sat down and looked at my one suitcase. Inside, 2 sweaters, my old journal, a needlepoint kit I hadn't touched since 2018, and one worn photograph of Jeremy holding a paper crown at his 5th birthday party. That night, I asked the staff to help me call my son. They dialed the number. It rang once, then again, then voicemail. I left a message. "Just wanted to let you know I'm all settled. Call me when you can." The next morning, I tried again. "This number is no longer accepting calls." "Blocked." I blinked. Asked the nurse to check again. She did. "Looks like he may have changed his settings," she said gently. Settings. That's what they call it now when your only child erases you. 3 days later, I got a letter from the bank. Typed. Cold. "This is to confirm the completion of the sale of 31 Oak Hollow Lane. Proceeds have been deposited to the designated beneficiary account ending in 0482. My house. The one I built room by room. The one with the lemon tree I planted for my husband after he died. The one with the needlepoint quote hanging over the fireplace. Do not mistake silence for surrender. Gone. Sold. And I hadn't signed a single thing. My breath caught like it was snagged on something inside my chest. I called again. Blocked. I emailed. Bounced back. I sent a letter. No reply. And that's when I realized this wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. Jeremy had moved me into a nursing home, blocked my number, sold my house, and wrote me off like a check he had already cashed. But what he didn't know, what no one at Maple Hill suspected, was that I was not fading. I was watching, and everything he left behind, the documents, the photos, the furniture, the needlepoint quote above the fireplace. He should have cleared it all, because I was going to stitch every piece of it into something he couldn't ignore. There's a particular smell that clings to places like Maple Hill. It's not foul. That would be too obvious. No, it's more insidious than that antiseptic kindness. The scent of lemony disinfectant and artificial vanilla pumped into the halls like a subtle reminder that everything here is fine, everyone here is safe, and no one here is angry. But I just didn't show it. The staff were kind enough, smiles stretched across exhausted faces' shoes that squeaked when they hurried past my open door. There was always music playing somewhere like a distraction on loop. Glenn Miller, Patsy Cline, something nostalgic, something you're supposed to hum along to while forgetting your world has been quietly repossessed. They assumed I was adjusting because I didn't protest. I didn't cry in the hallway. I didn't throw a tray in the dining room like Agnes on the 3rd floor. I was polite, quiet, cooperative, but inside, I was unraveling and memorizing every thread. On day 4, I visited the common room. They were showing The Sound of Music on a portable DVD player. I sat in the back corner pretending to watch, but mostly listening. The two nurses on break chatted behind the partition wall. "She's sweet," one of them said. The new one, Bernadette. "Oh, the teacher." "Yeah. Her son's the one that moved her in solo. No family tour, no paperwork questions. Just dropped her off with a smile and left. Makes you wonder." I didn't flinch, but my fingers clenched tighter around the styrofoam cup of tea. The next morning, I asked if I could see the intake forms Jeremy signed on my behalf. The administrator blinked. "I think your son has financial authority. Do you have a copy of the document stating that?" I asked. He hesitated. "It should be in the system. I'll look into it." He didn't return that day, but the nurse brought me a cupcake with green icing and said, "Your son said it's your favorite." He had remembered something then. Just not me. That night I sat in bed and reviewed what I had. My name now absent from the deed of my home. No access to my financials. No contact with my son. And a locked filing cabinet in the administrator's office, which according to the care assistant held all our legal documents. I needed to play this carefully, because when you're a woman in your 70s, people don't listen to rage, but they do listen to sweetness, to sewing circles, to little old ladies who smile while slowly, steadily pulling apart the lies they've been wrapped in. So I started asking questions during bingo night. To the other women, to the staff, casual ones like, "How long did it take before you got your mail redirected? Do you remember signing your own medical releases? Do they let you see your intake paperwork?" And I kept track, in my notebook. Each page marked with a small embroidered corner, stitched in the same color thread I used when I taught home ec my first year of teaching. Just a habit. One of the nurses saw it and laughed. "Are you documenting us, Mrs. Caldwell?" I smiled. "Of course not. I'm just old. I forget." That was when I realized the most dangerous weapon I had left. They thought I was declining. I saw it in their eyes. The soft-voiced tones. The way they offered to cut my meat at lunch. The gentle pats on the shoulder like I was one gust away from being forgotten. Perfect. Because that gave me something Jeremy never expected. Freedom inside a cage. So while they overlooked me, I started preparing. I requested art supplies. Said it was for a memory quilt. They were delighted. Therapeutic, the psychologist called it. They didn't realize I was sewing a timeline. Every square represented a date. The day he dropped me off. The day the bank letter arrived. The date listed on the house transfer. The fake obituary the realtor used in the estate summary. Yes, I found that too. Posted in a small local directory. In memory of Bernadette Caldwell, beloved mother and retired teacher. Passed peacefully survived by her son Jeremy Caldwell. No date. No funeral info. No record. Just enough to close a door, but not enough to keep it closed. I printed it from the community room computer, stitched it into the quilt. Then I circled the date with red thread, and under it sewed one line in careful cursive, "Still breathing." I smiled to myself as I tied the final knot that night. Because I knew something Jeremy didn't. He hadn't locked me in a home. He had left me in a fortress, and I was reinforcing the walls. The phrase hit me like a slow-motion car crash. I was walking back from the garden therapy session where they had us plant plastic pansies in a soil tray, because apparently the elderly can't be trusted with trowels when I passed the office copier. The machine had been left running. Someone had stepped out. On the tray, a fresh page lay warm and exposed words centered at the top in bold. "Property title transfer. 31 Oak Hollow Lane. My house." My heartbeat paused. I reached forward carefully like the page might bite. The first thing I saw was my name, or rather, the absence of it. Current title holder, Jeremy Thomas Caldwell. Previous owner, nay, direct transfer via power of attorney. My fingers clenched the paper so tightly it creased in the middle. Previous owner, nay, as if I'd never existed. No mention of my 37 years in that house. No record of the mortgage I paid off with summer school money. No line for the name of the woman who planted the azaleas by hand and buried her dog beneath the oak tree in the back. Just my son, standing alone on the deed. A nurse walked by, and I slipped the page back onto the tray like nothing had happened. Back in my room, I stood at the window and stared out at the parking lot. 3 cars. A man unloading flowers from a trunk. A bird perched on a wire. Everything looked normal. And yet, in my chest, it felt like the moment right before a storm when the pressure shifts and the trees go still. The next day, I requested a meeting with the administrator. Just a routine check-in, I said. I want to understand how things work here. He welcomed me into his office with corporate warmth, half friendly, half evasive. I was hoping to review my intake paperwork, I said casually. He blinked. That would be with your son, I believe. He handled most of the legal arrangements. And the power of attorney. En file. May I see it? A pause. I'll have to check with our legal team. I understand, I replied, smiling. I used to teach high school. I know how excuses work. He laughed, unsure if I was joking. I wasn't. That afternoon, I called the county clerk's office from the community room computer. I used the public property record search. Typed in my old address. There it was. Clear as water. Title transferred via electronic signature. Recorded date. 3 days after I arrived at Maple Hill. I never signed anything. I never saw a notary. I never even had a conversation about transferring the house. And then something else caught my eye. A notation beside the deed file. Estate transaction. Death of prior occupant, no probate filed. My breath caught in my throat. He didn't just remove me. He told them I was dead. That night, I didn't eat dinner. I sat in the soft light of my room holding my quilt squares like relics. I added a new one. Embroidered the phrase, "Nay, not applicable." I sewed it in black thread center square, because Jeremy hadn't just taken my house. He had taken my existence. And I finally understood the full scope of what I was up against. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a family squabble. This was identity erasure, executed in paperwork filed in silence. I pulled out my journal. Began a new entry. Phase 1 complete. Discovery. He forged the paperwork. Strategy. Document everything. Weapon. The quilt. Backup. None yet. I paused. Then below that line I wrote, he thinks I'm gone. Let's make that his biggest mistake. I tried his number again. One last time. It was late, nearly midnight. The halls at Maple Hill were quiet except for the occasional murmur of the night shift nurse watching reruns behind the front desk. I borrowed the facility phone under the pretense of calling my book club friend. The nurse barely looked up. I dialed Jeremy's number from memory like I had so many times before. Ring, ring. Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please check the number and try again. I hung up, stared at the wall, and felt the final cord snap. He had blocked me. Not metaphorically, not emotionally. Technically, permanently. Jeremy Caldwell had deleted me like I was a spam caller. Like I was a glitch. I hadn't cried in a long time, but I felt the sting behind my eyes, that swell of betrayal that's too sharp to release. So I held it in. Instead, I walked back to my room, opened my quilt and stitched another square, this one, a pale, silent blue. In the center, I embroidered one phrase, message undelivered. The next morning, I requested access to the community email station. I want to send a message to my niece, I said. No one questioned it. The email I typed wasn't to my niece. It was to the realtor, the one who had listed my house as a deceased estate in the online ad. I had seen her name, Rebecca Langley, a local agent with a smiling photo on the realty website and a tagline that read, "Helping families move forward." I wrote, "Dear Miss Langley, I believe you recently listed 31 Oak Hollow Lane on behalf of my son, Jeremy Caldwell. I'd like to clarify something important. I am not deceased. I am currently living well and coherent at Maple Hill Residence. I did not authorize the sale. I did not transfer the deed. And I have seen my belongings used in your staging photos. Please forward a copy of the transaction paperwork you received from my son. I will be reviewing it with counsel. Sincerely, Bernadette Caldwell." I didn't hit send immediately. I saved it as a draft, because I needed one more piece, visual proof. So that afternoon, I logged into the realty site from the same community desktop and found the listing. Still active, still glowing with words like full of character and estate sale opportunity. And there it was, my quilt, hanging over the back of the couch, folded neatly like a throw. The very same one I'd been stitching since my early 40s. The one with my initials sewn into the lower right corner. B. C. I downloaded the photo, printed it, and brought it to Margot. She was one of the few residents sharp enough to notice things. We'd been making quiet conversation over crossword puzzles and pudding cups for weeks. She looked at the printout and whistled. "That's your quilt." "And that's my house," I said. She set down her pencil. "Then what are you going to do?" I picked up my needle and held it like a weapon. "I'm going to sew my way back into existence." That evening, I returned to the email. I attached the quilt photo. Then I added one last line. P.S. You might want to remove the listing before I stitch your name into my deposition. Send. Gone. The next morning, I received a reply. "Mrs. Caldwell, I don't know what to say. I had no idea. Your son said the home was part of a probate case. We had no reason to question it. I will remove the listing immediately and send over all documents I received. I am so sorry. Rebecca Langley." I printed that email too, folded it, sewed it into the quilt. Right next to message undelivered, I added, "Now they know." I wasn't whispering anymore. I was writing my name square by square back into the fabric of a life someone else tried to erase. And soon the world wouldn't just know I was alive. They'd remember I was never gone. Needlepoint is a quiet art. It requires patience, precision, and a steady hand. You can't rush a pattern. You can't skip stitches. And if you do it right, no one sees the knots underneath, only the story unfolding on the surface. I spent 40 years teaching high schoolers how to read poetry. Now I was teaching myself how to stitch my life back together with thread and threadbare legal strategy. The morning after the email to the realtor, I received a thin envelope slipped under my door. No return address, but I knew exactly what it was. The paperwork. Inside, Rebecca Langley had included the listing agreement Jeremy signed, a copy of the forged deed, a notarized declaration that I was no longer living in or capable of managing the estate. And most damning of all, a printed obituary submission, the one I had already seen online. But seeing it on paper, official letterhead, sealed and stamped, was different. It felt surgical, clean, precise, like someone had removed me from my own story without leaving a single drop of blood. I took a deep breath, folded the papers, and placed them in a new binder. This one wouldn't be sewn. It would be filed. Margot found me in the lounge that afternoon, sitting with the papers spread out around me like puzzle pieces. She tapped the notary line with her pen. "You know what this means, right?" I nodded. "It means Jeremy lied. But worse, it means someone signed off on it. No witness statement. No photo verification. No log number," she pointed out. "He made it look real," I whispered. "But not careful." Margot smiled. "Sloppy forgery is a coward's signature." We contacted Ivy Hayes that same day, a former student of mine, now an attorney for elder protection law. I hadn't spoken to her in years. She called me back within minutes. "Ms. Caldwell," she said, voice warm with recognition. "You once taught me the poetry of Sylvia Plath. Now I hear you're writing your own epic." "More like a legal haiku," I said. "Short, sharp, and meant to stab." Ivy laughed. We went over the documents. She asked for copies, notes, and proof of my cognitive state. I had that too. The psychologist at Maple Hill had tested me last week as part of their wellness assessment. I scored 29 out of 30. He said I was sharper than most staff. I added that report to the binder. Then I pulled out my latest square for the quilt. In white thread, I embroidered, "Notarized. Not real." That evening, I asked the administrator again for the power of attorney document. He tried to brush me off. "I understand your concern, Mrs. Caldwell, but your son assured us." I stopped him. "I'd like to see what I signed." He hesitated. "That might take a few days." "Good," I said. "That's exactly how long I need to prepare the injunction." The word hung there like a crack of thunder. He blinked. "Injunction." "Yes," I said calmly. "Against the sale. Against my son. Against anyone who tries to bury a woman who is very much alive." He didn't answer, just nodded. I returned to my room, took out the quilt, and stitched another square, this one in a rich blood red. She signed nothing. The next morning, Ivy emailed me back. "I've reviewed everything. We have enough to move forward. I'll file an emergency motion with the county clerk to halt any further transactions. But I need one last thing from you, Miss Caldwell. A signature. A real one. Yours. I cried. Not because I was weak, but because I finally saw what strength looked like in ink. Not forged. Not filtered through a son's ambition, but mine. So I signed it. Clean looping cursive. The same way I'd signed every gradebook, every student recommendation letter, every handwritten recipe, every library card application. And just beneath that line, I added the date. The real one. Because from now on, I would not be remembered as a mother quietly tucked away in a room that smelled like sanitizer. I would be remembered as a woman who stitched her way back into the truth. One signature at a time. It started with a knock, soft, barely audible like someone tapping out a secret. I opened the door to find an orderly standing there, young, distracted, holding a slim brown box. "This was delivered for you, Mrs. Caldwell." I took the package, heart thudding. No return address. Inside, a single 8x10 photo framed in thin black wood. At first I didn't recognize it. Then the memory hit me. It was a photo of me, maybe 20 years ago, sitting on the front porch of my house, arms crossed, 1 foot tucked under me, laughing at something Jeremy had said behind the camera. My garden was blooming behind me. I wore a blue linen shirt, my hair pulled back with a pen. The photo had been in the hallway gallery wall at Oak Hollow Lane, and now it was here. No note, no explanation. Just the woman I used to be. I held it up in the light, examined every corner, and then I saw it faint pencil marks on the back of the frame. Didn't feel right to throw it away. See. It didn't take me long to guess. Cassandra, my former neighbor, a kind woman always watching out from across the street. She'd bring over lemon bars in summer, send me cards in winter, and once threatened to call the HOA when Jeremy parked a junk car on the lawn for a week. She must have seen the moving trucks, must have realized something wasn't right. She had saved a piece of me. I wept. Quietly, gratefully. And then I hung the photo above my bed right next to the square quilt in progress. That day, I didn't sew another patch. Instead, I sat with the picture and remembered that version of myself. The woman in the frame. Strong, witty, self-possessed. Not invisible, not erased, not gone. That evening, Ivy called again. "Bernadette, we're in motion," she said. "The court issued a temporary freeze on all asset transfers connected to the Oak Hollow property." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. She continued. "Next step is to petition to nullify the power of attorney. But it's going to get messy." "I expect it to," I said. "And there's one more thing. We've received a cease and desist letter." I blinked. "From Jeremy." "Yes. Through his lawyer. He's claiming emotional distress. He says you're slandering him." I laughed out loud. "Slander? I haven't even started yet." Ivy chuckled. "We'll draft a response. But prepare yourself. He's going to fight." I looked back at the photo, at my younger self, mid-laugh, head tilted, eyes bright. "Good," I said. "Let him." At breakfast the next morning, Margot brought me a flower. A single daisy plucked from the patio garden. "You're making waves," she whispered. 2 other residents looked at me with cautious admiration. I was becoming a whisper, a rumor. The woman who wasn't gone. I returned to my room and threaded my needle again. This time I chose yellow thread, the color of daffodils, of memory, of defiance in bloom. I embroidered a square that read, "She still smiled," because no matter what he took, the house, the phone calls, the obituary, he could not take the image of me that others remembered. He couldn't unmake the woman in the frame. And as I held that photo up to the morning light again, I realized something powerful. I didn't need to be framed to be seen. I just needed to refuse to disappear. The courthouse smelled like old paper and ambition. I hadn't been inside one since I served jury duty back in 1998. But now, instead of sitting in the gallery with a notebook in my lap, I was the case. The plaintiff. The woman whose son had declared her a legal inconvenience and tried to erase her like an outdated file. I wore a gray blouse with pearl buttons, my good shoes, and a quiet steel in my spine. Ivy met me at the door, her hair pulled back in a sharp bun, confidence radiating from every step. She handed me a folder. "Just in case the judge wants to hear directly from you." Inside. The affidavit I had signed a notarized statement of mental fitness and photos of my quilt, of my room at Maple Hill, of me, holding a newspaper dated last week. Proof of life, proof of clarity, proof that no matter how tidy Jeremy's version of the story had been, I was not just alive, I was present. We entered the courtroom. Jeremy sat on the other side in a tailored suit he couldn't afford without my equity. He didn't look at me. His lawyer did, though, briefly. And then, away. Like eye contact with me was too much. The judge, a woman maybe 10 years younger than me, adjusted her glasses and tapped her gavel. Let's begin. The hearing was short but intense. Ivy laid everything out. Forged documents, the fake obituary, the financial transactions that happened without my consent, the home listing, the image of my quilt in the background. The quilt seemed to strike a nerve. It was something so human, so obviously personal. Jeremy's lawyer objected. That image proves nothing. But Ivy smiled. It proves what Mr. Caldwell took wasn't just property. He took memory. He took identity. The judge nodded slowly, then turned to Jeremy. Do you have anything to say, Mr. Caldwell? Jeremy stood, cleared his throat. My mother. She's confused. She's always been dramatic. She told me she didn't want the house anymore. She was lonely. She wanted to be around people her age. I stood up, not waiting for permission. My name is Bernadette Caldwell, I said clearly. I may be older. I may even be lonelier than I care to admit. But I did not ask to be erased. Jeremy's mouth opened slightly as if my voice had slapped him. I turned to the judge. He took everything. Without permission. He lied about my death. He blocked my number. And when I asked to see the power of attorney, he said I had already signed it. I hadn't. There was silence in the courtroom. No one even shuffled their papers. The judge nodded, once her expression unreadable. Then, I will be issuing a temporary reversal of power of attorney, pending full investigation. The property is now frozen from sale or transfer. You are not to contact your mother, Mr. Caldwell, until this matter is resolved. Jeremy's lawyer tried to object. The judge shut him down. And just like that, a piece of my life had returned. Back at Maple Hill, I sat by the window with Margot. She held my hand for a moment quietly. I heard she said, "The staff are whispering." I smiled. Good whispers, I hope. The kind that say, "Don't mess with the woman in room 214. I chuckled. Then I picked up my thread again. This square I stitched with charcoal gray on cream linen. It read, "She spoke. They heard." I hung it beside the others, now forming a mosaic of silent defiance. Margot watched me, her eyes wet. "You're turning this into a map," she whispered. "A map back to myself," I said. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. My story. My name. My place in the world. And I wasn't done. Not yet. 2 days after the hearing, Ivy called again. She sounded different. Excited. "Bernadette," she said, "we have an opportunity. There's a journalist from the Daily Morning Herald, someone I trust, who covers elder abuse and legal overreach. I told her your story. She wants to interview you." I felt the breath catch in my throat. "I don't want pity," I said. "You won't get pity," Ivy replied. "You'll get power. Exposure protects you now. The more people who know the truth, the harder it will be for Jeremy to twist it again." I agreed. The next morning, a young woman named Simone James arrived at Maple Hill with a notepad, a tape recorder, and the kindest eyes I'd seen in years. She asked questions with care, not intrusion. She didn't flinch when I told her about the forged paperwork, the blocked number, or the obituary. But she paused when I showed her the quilt. Each square had its own story. I laid them out across the bed, like testimony. "This," Simone whispered, "is heartbreak stitched into defiance." I smiled. "It's what I had." She snapped a photo. Then she asked, "Would you mind if we publish this?" For a moment I hesitated. These pieces of fabric were my secrets, my screams. But then I remembered what Ivy said. Exposure is protection. I nodded. Simone left that afternoon. The article went live the next morning. It exploded. The headline read, "She was declared dead by her son. Now she's stitched her way back to life." Within hours, the staff at Maple Hill were buzzing. By lunch, my name was trending on a small subreddit for elder rights. By dinner, a radio station had called Ivy for a live interview. I sat in the lounge and watched it all from a distance. Margot held my hand and whispered, "You've become a legend." But all I could think about was the last square I hadn't sewn. It was folded neatly in my drawer untouched. The one that would carry Jeremy's name. That night, someone knocked again. It was the administrator. This time, his face was pale. We received a call from Child Protective Services. I blinked. Child. He corrected himself. Adult Protective Services. They're launching a formal inquiry into Mr. Caldwell's conduct. There's a state investigator arriving tomorrow. I nodded. Good. He hesitated. There's something else. He handed me an envelope. It was a letter, Jeremy's handwriting, inside. Mom, this got out of hand. You didn't have to go to the pressy. I was trying to protect you. I'm sorry you felt hurt, but it's not all how it looks. Can we just let this fade? I'll stop the sale. You can keep the house, but please, no more press. Jeremy. I reread it twice. Nowhere did he say I'm sorry for what I did. Only sorry for how it looked. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't say he missed me. He didn't ask if I needed anything. He asked me to be quiet. So I picked up a needle, threaded black into crimson, and finished the square. He said, "Stop talking." I stitched it, placed it last on the quilt, and then leaned back. Because I wouldn't stop. I would keep speaking. With words. With fabric. With the truth. Because silence is how they win. And stories are how we claw our way back. The next morning was overcast. Rain tapped at the window panes like a soft metronome marking time for a story not yet finished. I was sipping weak coffee and rereading Simone's article when there was a knock at my door. It wasn't Margot. Not Ivy. Not even the administrator. It was Claire, my daughter-in-law. I hadn't seen her since the night Jeremy told me I was better off with professionals. Claire had always been quiet around me. Not cold exactly, but watchful. Her expressions were small. Her voice rarely raised above a whisper. I used to think she was shy. Now I wasn't sure what to think. She stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, holding something in a manila envelope. "May I come in?" she asked. I nodded slowly, unsure what this meant. She stepped inside and sat on the chair by the window. Her hands were trembling. "I didn't know," she said, voice barely above the hum of the radiator. "Jeremy told me you had moved voluntarily, that you wanted to downsize. That the house was too much for you. He said, you'd agreed to everything." I didn't reply. I watched her face instead, searching for guilt, for deflection, for the performance of innocence. But all I saw was fear. Not fear of me. Fear of something bigger unraveling. "I only found out the truth after the article," she said. I confronted him. He said you were overreacting and that the sale had already closed. That made me sit upright. "Closed?" I asked sharply. "The court put a freeze on it." She blinked, startled. "I didn't know that." He said it was too late to reverse anything. That he already had the deposit wired to his account. I felt a slow wave of nausea roll through me. Claire opened the envelope. Inside, photocopies. Documents with my forged signature. Transfer of deed. Bank account routing. The fake obituary submitted to a digital record archive. "He kept them in the study," she whispered. "I took these while he was asleep. I don't know why I'm here. I guess I just wanted you to know I didn't help him." She looked at me, then really looked. "I have a mother too." I nodded, not because I forgave her, but because truth has a way of cracking through the weakest walls, and today, Claire let some light through. Ivy arrived within the hour. She scanned the documents quickly, eyes narrowing. "This changes things," she said. "We've got fraud, false death filing, financial abuse. If this holds, we won't just freeze the assets, we can push for criminal charges." I sat silently for a moment. "Will that make me feel better?" I asked. Ivy paused. "No, but it will make him stop." I looked down at my quilt. At the final square from yesterday, he said, "Stop talking." No, I wouldn't stop. That evening, I held a meeting. Not with lawyers. With other women. At Maple Hill. I'd started receiving notes slipped under my door, left by my breakfast tray, tucked into folded napkins. My son took over my finances last year. They said I had dementia. I didn't. I'm still trying to get my name back on the will. These women weren't strangers. They were me. One by one, they gathered in the lounge. No TV, no puzzles. Just a circle of chairs, knees touching. We called it the thread circle. I brought my sewing kit and a stack of extra linen squares. Margot went first, then Dottie, then Lorraine. Each one stitched a single phrase of pain. One read, "They took my birthday." Another, "He moved her in before I moved out." We didn't cry. We embroidered. Because sometimes the thread tells the truth better than the tongue. A week passed and the quilt had grown. No longer was it just mine. It stretched across 2 folding tables now stitched by 15 women who each had a story that no one had asked for. Until now, it had become something more than fabric. It was resistance. It was memory. It was proof. The administrator at Maple Hill offered to hang it in the main lobby next to the fireplace. We agreed. One evening, a young man came to visit his grandmother and stood staring at the quilt for almost 10 minutes. I watched from across the room. Finally, he turned to me and asked, "Who wrote they gave my room to her dog?" "Dottie," I said gently. He blinked. "My aunt's dog." I nodded. His face darkened, and I knew the ripple had begun. Later that night, I received another envelope. This time by certified mail. It was from Jeremy. Inside, a formal letter of apology, typed, cold. "Dear Mother, I acknowledge that my actions caused distress. I apologize for any miscommunication regarding your property and your transition to the care facility. I understand that the matter is now under legal review and I will comply with any court mandates." It wasn't addressed to Mom. It was addressed to Mother. No warmth, no remorse. Just legal padding dressed as an olive branch. There was a check inside. $11,000. Reimbursement, it said in the memo. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it back up, placed it between 2 squares on the quilt, and pinned it there with a sewing needle. Ivy told me later, "Don't cash it. It's bait." "I know," I said. "I just want people to see what he thinks I'm worth." 2 days later, something unexpected happened. Simone the journalist called. "I got an email from someone at the state senate," she said breathlessly. "They want to feature your story at an upcoming hearing on elder exploitation. You'd be invited to testify." I sat down slowly. "They said your story is shifting the conversation," Simone added. "You've become a symbol." I felt something catch in my chest. Not pride, not vindication, something deeper, something sacred. I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was becoming the thread in someone else's unraveling. At the hearing, I wore navy blue and carried a square of fabric in my hands. The room was large, the kind with microphones and name plaques. But I didn't feel small. "My name is Bernadette Caldwell," I said clearly. And then I told them about the fake obituary, about the silence, about the house with the lemon tree, about how even now, months later, I still wake up reaching for my old keys, only to remember that my locks have been changed by the boy I once held as a baby. There was silence when I finished. Then applause, not loud, not thunderous, but long, a still-standing echo of respect. Afterward, a woman with graying curls approached me. She said, "I saw your quilt in the article. I made one too. Mine says, 'She died with my inheritance.'" I nodded. She showed me her photo. Then she hugged me and whispered, "We're sewing justice." I didn't cry. I smiled. Because yes, we were. The courtroom smelled like varnished wood and old paper. The kind of place where stories are rewritten in legalese and pain gets measured in pages. I sat beside Ivy at the plaintiff's table. Across from us, Jeremy looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just grown. He didn't meet my eyes. Claire sat behind him 2 rows back. She looked straight ahead, jaw clenched, as if holding back 1,000 confessions she was too tired to defend anymore. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Then the hearing began. Ivy started with the facts. The forged documents, the falsified death record, the block number, the house sale frozen in limbo, the check, the insult. She presented the quilt too, laid it out carefully across a wooden easel square by aching square. "This isn't evidence in the traditional sense," Ivy said, "but it is evidence of impact, of harm, of a woman stitched into silence reclaiming her voice." Jeremy's lawyer tried to object, but the judge let it stand. Then it was my turn. I stood, held my cane steady, walked to the front. "My name is Bernadette Caldwell," I said clearly. I was declared dead by my own son, not because I was dying, but because I was inconvenient. The courtroom was silent. I didn't ask for revenge. I asked for love. I didn't want compensation. I wanted to go home. I paused. My home was not made of bricks. It was made of stories, laughter. That lemon tree I planted the year Jeremy was born. And now it's just gone. My voice trembled. I didn't hide it. I looked straight at Jeremy. You could have come to me. You could have said, "Mom, this is hard. Can we figure it out?" I would have said yes. But you didn't ask. You stole. Jeremy's face stayed still, a statue of arrogance. I nodded once and returned to my seat. The judge didn't deliberate long. The court found in my favor. The house sale was fully reversed. Jeremy was ordered to return all assets, pay legal costs, and pending a separate investigation face possible criminal fraud charges for the death filing and signature forgery. But that wasn't the best part. The best part came last. The judge turned to me and said, "Mrs. Caldwell, the court recognizes your courage, your voice, and your sewing." I laughed quietly, tears in my throat. Outside the courthouse there were cameras. Simone was there. So was Claire. She walked over slowly. "I'm divorcing him," she said, no preamble. I blinked. She reached into her coat and handed me a photograph. It was of Jeremy. As a child, sitting in my kitchen, holding a lemon. "Whatever happens next," she said, "you deserve to remember the boy who used to laugh in your lap, not just the man he became." I took the photo and folded it into my purse. I didn't say thank you, because some things are too big for thank yous. I didn't go back right away. The court reversed the sale. Yes, but the house stood empty as if it had been holding its breath since I left. The locks were changed again, this time with keys that had my initials etched into them. I held the new key for a full minute on the porch. Then I stepped inside. It didn't feel like mine at first. Not fully. The lemon tree was still there out back, its branches heavier unpruned. A few early fruits had dropped onto the grass, already browning in the sun. The living room bore the ghost of someone else's decor, staged furniture from the sale, mismatched curtains still nailed up. A hollowed-out version of my life. But the fireplace was the same. So was the scuff on the hallway baseboard from when Jeremy rode his tricycle too fast, and the faint crack in the windowsill where I once caught him carving his initials with a spoon. I sat on the floor. It was the first time I had touched my own carpet in nearly 9 months. Then I went to the closet, pulled out a box labeled winter. Tucked inside were mitten scarves and a tiny tin, my sewing needles. The house had let me back in. Now it was time to sew my way through it. The first room I restored was the kitchen. I rehung the copper pots, restocked the pantry with tea and flour, put my old kettle back on the stove. Then I washed every dish, every fork, every glass because I wanted my fingerprints back on them. Ownership isn't just legal, it's tactile. A week later, I hosted a gathering. Not a party, just 7 women from Maple Hill, now independent again, thanks to Simone's articles and the attention they brought. They brought their quilts. We laid them out across my lawn like flags of a quiet revolution. Neighbors peeked over fences. One man asked, "Is this a fundraiser?" "No," I said. "It's a memory." He didn't understand, but that was fine. After they left, I went into Jeremy's old room. I hadn't been in there since before he moved me out. His childhood drawings were still taped inside the closet. One read, "Me and Mom at the beach." The sun looked like an orange wheel, and I was smiling so big my stick figure face had no cheeks. I traced the lines with my finger. Then I took it down and folded it once, twice, and stitched it into the quilt, right next to the square that read, "He blocked my number," because even the worst betrayals are born from once soft beginnings. And we carry both, always. It was a rainy Thursday when I heard the knock on the door. 3 slow taps, hesitant like regret wearing wet shoes. I opened it and found Jeremy. He stood in the rain, with no umbrella hands in his coat pockets, and eyes that no longer held the certainty of entitlement, but the erosion of something else. Shame. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. I said nothing. He looked older. Not in years, but in edges. He'd lost weight. The smug roundness of his face had been whittled into lines that looked carved by worry. "I just wanted to see the house," he murmured. "It's not yours anymore," I replied. I know. He glanced at the quilt visible through the living room window. They showed it on the news, he said. Even the part with my name. I didn't flinch. That part was true. He nodded. I lost everything, he admitted. Claire left. The firm dropped me. I'm sleeping in a rented basement with a space heater. I folded my arms. You came to ask for something. He hesitated. I came to say I'm sorry. Silence stretched between us. Then he added, not in the court-mandated way. Not the check. I mean, you didn't deserve any of it. My jaw clenched. Do you remember I said slowly that Christmas when you were 7? You cried because you thought Santa forgot the batteries for your robot. He blinked. Yeah, and you drove out in the snow to get them. I didn't even put on socks, I whispered. I just ran to the car. He looked down. You think it's easy to forget that kind of love? I asked. Because it isn't. Jeremy's voice cracked. I was scared. About your memory. The house. The bills. I thought I could fix it by taking control. You didn't fix it, I said. You erased me. I let him stand there soaked. Not because I hated him. Because healing isn't a porch conversation. It's a pilgrimage. You should go, I said quietly. He nodded, turned, and walked back into the rain. That night, I added a new square. Soft blue. One stitch crooked. It read, he came back. I didn't let him in. And I slept well for the first time in years. Because forgiveness is not always a door. Sometimes it's a window we keep closed. 3 months later, I was invited to display the quilt at the State Museum. Not in a gallery corner, not beside forgotten textiles, but as the centerpiece of an exhibition titled Voices in Thread, Stories of Forgotten Women. I stood before the crowd on opening night wearing a navy dress and a pin shaped like a lemon leaf. The same quilt that began as my protest now stretched over a full wall. Each square backlit magnified. Some held embroidered phrases. Others were stitched with pressed photos, recipes, old receipts, or court documents. People stared. Some cried. A young girl traced one square with her finger. It read, "They buried me before I died." Her mother pulled her close. A reporter asked, "What made you start this?" I looked at the camera and said I was erased. This was my way of being seen again. She paused. "Do you think your son will see this exhibit?" "I hope he does," I said. "Why?" "Because stories have weight," I replied, "even when told in cotton and thread. And someday he'll need to remember that mine was heavier than his silence." That night, as the museum lights dimmed, I ran my hand over one final square stitched just days earlier. It read, "Not all who are forgotten stay that way." Next to it was a photograph. A tiny boy on a beach holding a lemon, me in the background laughing. I stayed until the building emptied. Then I took a deep breath and whispered, "Thank you, house. Thank you, silence. Thank you, heartbreak. You tried to bury me, and I grew roots." When I stepped outside, it was drizzling again. But this time I wasn't cold. I was walking home, and the keys in my purse made the most beautiful sound. 1 year to the day after I was moved into the nursing home, I held a gathering in my backyard. This time it wasn't just for quilts. It was for stories. Dozens of women came. Some old friends. Some strangers who'd seen the exhibit. Some younger women who brought their mothers quietly admitting, "We didn't understand what it meant to be erased until we saw you." We laid quilts across the grass again. Bright blues, deep reds, the occasional square of sorrow stitched right beside joy. I didn't wear black. I wore lemon yellow. Midway through the afternoon, I stood to speak. "My name is Bernadette Caldwell," I began. "And I used to think growing old meant fading." Heads turned. Some nodded. But I was wrong. Growing old means gathering more threads, more stories, more weight. And when they try to silence us, what they don't realize is that by then we've already sewn ourselves into history. Applause followed. Soft at first, then strong. After they left, I walked back into my house, lit a candle, opened my sewing basket, and added one final square to the quilt. A plain cream cloth, no photos, just 12 black-stitched words. He blocked my number, but I remembered my voice. I hung the quilt in the hallway where the mirror used to be, because I no longer needed to check my reflection to know who I was. I was the woman who came back, who stitched silence into power, who lost everything and reclaimed it thread by thread. So before you sit down and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Because this story, you might actually regret missing out on it.